Good afternoon, YouTube. My name is Flightsimguy, and today I'm going to talk about flaps. Subject everyone probably knows about, but I'll go ahead and cover it anyway. I am in Field Airs Phenom at San Francisco. Fair weather, and I'll be doing this presentation while flying this bird around. So let me go ahead and get this bad boy started. Brakes on, battery master on.
Okay.
Fuel is auto, and I can just go ahead and start engine 2. Now it's going to take a while for the gyros to align, so these screens are going to be like this for not exactly sure how many minutes, but be a couple of minutes before these go to normal. Okay, there goes engine 1. Let's go engine 2. There goes engine 2. Let's do engine 1. Okay, we got a good light on engine number 1. Turn on the wrong damn generator. Alright, we are on runway, what is that? 1 right. Let's go ahead and get this lined up. And I can't do anything because it's not here yet. Alright, what else can we do in the meantime? Go through our flows. Oh, that's good. On. Pump is automatic. Don't need any of that. Okay. Over here. All that is good. Alright, so before or while this thing aligns, what are flaps? Alright, everybody knows what flaps are, right? They're these things that drop off the wings back here, or drop off the wings back here. According to Wikipedia, flaps are a type of high-lift device used to increase the lift of an aircraft wing at a given airspeed. Flaps are usually mounted on the wing trailing edges of a fixed-wing aircraft. Flaps are used to lower the minimum speed at which the aircraft can be safely flown, and to increase the angle of descent for landing. In other words, flaps makes the wings a little bit bigger so that they can fly slower than you normally could without the flaps. Deploying flaps lowers stall speeds, and typically flaps are used to assist in landings and takeoffs. Now I'm in a jet engine aircraft, so I'm going to need 2 notches of flaps. I'll talk about flaps in jets in a moment, but first I need to set this thing to 1. Remember from the flying in a pattern video, 1, put a 0 next to it, that's 10, which is right here. I'm also going to go ahead and move the heading bug there. I don't need to, I don't plan on using the autopilot, but out of force of habit, I always put the heading bug and the course needle to align with the runway I plan to take off from. This is the active runway for San Francisco. Where the hell is the heading bug? Jeez. I keep forgetting. This, I can't right click. It's a different thing. Alright. Alright, so before we continue the discussion on flaps, and that's what it looks like on this banner here. Everybody knows that. I'm going to go ahead and take off. I'm just going to go ahead and fly around while I talk about flaps. Let's go ahead and get going. I think I need to set my trim about there. Takeoff configuration.
No takeoff. Brake.
Okay, I'm good. The brakes.
Takeoff. Okay.
Alright, let's go. Okay, the aircraft is a little bit sluggish because it's carrying the weight configuration of my Jessica Dubroff mission. That'll be published shortly. Alright, let's go ahead and rotate.
Positive brake.
Positive brake, gear up. San Francisco is at sea level. Flaps up 1.
Gear up.
Crossing through 1,000 feet. Flaps up. Alright, so I'm in a jet aircraft, and I just use flaps to take off. In prop aircraft, you do not need flaps. There's a very good reason for that. The spinning propellers create a prop wash which goes over the wings, and that adds extra lift. Because of that, for the most part, if you're flying a prop aircraft, you do not need to use flaps when you're taking off. However, there are exceptions to that general rule. The main exception is this. If you're carrying a lot of weight, you need flaps. Because remember, flaps lower the stall speed and it helps you get in the air quicker. So if you're carrying a lot of weight in props, or if you're taking off from a high altitude airport where the air is thin, in which case you're going to need more runway. If the weather is hot and humid air gives less performance. It's bad for performance for aircraft. And if the runway is short, any combination of the above, you need to use 1 or 2 notches of flaps when you're flying a prop plane. When you're flying a jet aircraft do not have prop wash. The only air going over a jet's wings is what it faces when it's running on the runway. It doesn't have a propeller to give that extra prop wash. So on jets, you must use at least 2 notches of flaps when you're taking off. Now, you've noticed me using the word notch to describe how to use flaps. Well, flaps, get too high here. Flaps are deployed in stages. In this case, it's 4 stages. Each stage I call a notch. On some piston aircraft, such as the Beech Duke, there are only 2 flap settings: approach and down. A lot of propeller aircraft, that is how the flaps are staged. You only have 2 settings: approach when you're coming into land, and down when you're on full flaps on final. I think there is one exception to that. The B-52 bomber only has 2 flap settings: flaps up, flaps down. So that makes it easy for the bomber pilots to decide when to lower flaps. Speaking of when to lower flaps, if you're in regular cruise speed, say you're in this aircraft and you're going at 300, 320 knots or whatever, at 25,000 feet or whatever, you can't just deploy flaps. If you do that, you're going to damage the aircraft. Every flap setting has a speed limit. In this case, it doesn't say it. You'd have to look in the pilot operating handbook. If you looked at my videos with the 747, you'll notice that there's a part of the flight deck where it actually says the speed limits of when you're supposed to deploy flaps. On jet aircraft, you need to look that up. On props, it's very, very easy to know when to start using flaps. The speed indicator on the left side, that white arc that covers the numbers towards the lower end, once you enter that white arc, it is safe to give it the first notch of flaps. And the slower you go, the more flaps you give. And it's as simple as that. I always have flaps mapped to keys on my flight gear. Why? Because you're always going to use them. You have your yoke for the ailerons and the elevator, and then you have your rudder pedals or the joystick twisted for the rudder. You have your throttle, mixture, and props. Always have buttons for flaps. Actually, you only need 1 button. A rocker switch would be perfect. Every time you press the up one, you raise the flaps. Every time you press the bottom one, you put down the flaps. There are many types of flap designs. Let me take a moment and show you here the different type of flap designs that are on aircraft. Okay, now another thought that you can probably deduce, I'll go over it anyway. If you're in a jet aircraft and in any of those conditions where a prop aircraft might need flaps, if you're in a jet aircraft you might need 1 notch extra flaps so that you can get in the air a little bit sooner before you run out of runway. Alright, so also Everyone has their own technique when it comes to raising flaps. A lot of pilots I've seen on YouTube, the second they're in the air, flaps comes up immediately after gear up. I don't do that. I progressively raise flaps starting at 500 feet above the ground through 1,000 feet above the ground to slowly bring the flaps up. There's a good reason for that. If you raise the flaps while you're climbing and one of your engine dies, then you might be in a world of hurt, because you're going to be going at such a speed that it's going to be hard to maneuver the plane to execute a backup plan, go around or whatever. You want to use flaps until you're high enough in the air that you feel safe. Couple more points worth mentioning with regards to wing flaps. If you're landing in a stiff crosswind or a headwind, you probably won't need to use full flaps. You may need to use 1 or 2 notches, but definitely not full. Think about it for a second. If you're going into a headwind, you don't need that extra lift because you're getting it from the wind that's coming into you. You know, that gives you that extra lift. If you try landing the stiff crosswind or a headwind with full flaps, what's going to happen is you're going to be floating over the runway. And that's kind of dangerous, because if you get a gust in any sort of direction, wind shear or whatever, it's just going to blow you off. You need to be coming in nice and a steady speed to penetrate that crosswind or that headwind. So you definitely do not want to use full flaps. Double check your flap settings when you're taking off in a jet aircraft. There have been several commercial accidents where the planes have crashed because the pilots either neglected to set flaps or they neglected to set the proper flaps. There have been a couple incidents with the Boeing 727. The flaps are set in such a way that it's set in the flaps 1 position, but if you look at it at an angle, it looks like in the flaps 2. And what will happen is if you try taking off, it doesn't say no takeoff like this plane. It just blares a warning saying something is not right, and then you have to figure out what it is. There was this one aircraft, one commercial flight. I'll include the details in the notes below. They were taking off from one of the western states, and they started their takeoff roll, and the warning system just blared out, and they're like, oh, something's wrong, so they aborted, or they came back off the throttle, hit the brakes, turn around, and they're like, what's going on here? And they couldn't see a problem. Everything looked fine. So they told the passengers that there was all these rabbits on the runway. Well, there wasn't the rabbits. They tried again. Same thing happened. And before they started rolling, the warning went off, and they stopped. They double checked everything. Everything seems fine. They started again, but the third time they disabled that warning. And halfway down the runway, the co-pilot's like, oh my dear God, it's the flaps. We don't have the right flap setting. So the pilot mashed on the brakes, put up the speed brakes or the spoilers, and put the throttle to idle, and he was able to stop before running off the runway. And what it was because the flap was in flaps 1 or 1 notch higher than it was supposed to be, or 1 notch lower. And by then, they damaged the brakes, blew out a tire, and whatnot. In another incident with the 727, the pilots were violating the sterile cockpit rule, and they were just talking about stuff. And they went to take off. They didn't have enough flaps. By the time they rotated, the plane would not leave the runway. The wings wobbled back and forth. Long story short, they crashed, and the investigation revealed that they did not set the flaps. They totally missed flaps in their takeoff checklist. So when you fly in jet aircraft, you do not want to take off without flaps. It's going to cause you all sorts of problems. Alright, when flying in light piston aircraft, whenever you give flaps, the plane is going to balloon a little bit. Always prepare for that balloon. Just go ahead and push the yoke down to prepare for that balloon. And by doing that, the balloon is that extra lift. And when you get that extra lift, it's going to rob you of a little bit of airspeed. So once you correct for the lift to maintain altitude, it's going to slow you down. Flaps also help you to slow down. The MD-80 is the only plane in the world, I think, that it has the various notches for flaps, but within each notch of flaps, it has a little tool that you can actually dial in a specific flap setting in between each notch of flaps, so you can get exactly the right amount of flaps that you're looking for. Obviously, with that capability comes with the performance tables that tells you how the plane will perform when you customize the flap setting in between each particular notch. Flaps pretty much works the same across all aircraft. They give you extra lift, help you take off, help you land, and you have to set them. One aircraft is the exception, and that's the F-16 Falcon. You don't need to set flaps on the F-16, the computer automatically does it for you. It will tell when you're taking off or when you're landing, and it will set the flaps for you. When executing a missed approach, always remember, raise your flaps. When doing touch and goes in proper aircraft, remember, raise your flaps after you've done the landing and you're taking off again. Pretty high up, so you can get down. One last thing, should I land at, is that my airport? Let's see here. Yep, that's my airport. So let me go ahead and bring myself in. And one last thing to mention, flaps and speed brakes, or actually no, flaps and speed brakes do mix. Speed brakes are on the fuselage. You can use flaps while using speed brakes. Speed brakes just slow you down. You can't use flaps while you're using spoilers. They are the opposites. Flaps and spoilers do not mix. Flaps will slow you down and add extra lift. I'm a little bit high, so I'm going to go ahead and put out some. I think this key isn't mapped anymore. I need to fix that. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. The slash key deploys the spoilers, and for some reason it's not doing that. Let me go ahead and options, settings, controls, buttons, keys. Let's see here. Is it under S for spoilers? Spoilers on off. For some reason, spoilers extract. Yeah, it's on here. I'm not sure why it's not coming out. Let's go down to spoilers. That is weird. I'm deploying the spoilers. For some reason it's not working on my planes. I'm not sure what the problem is. Anyway, flaps and spoilers don't mix. Why? Flaps slows you down but gives you lift. Spoilers slows you down and dumps lift. So some aircraft says it's highly, they highly recommend that you don't do that. Other airlines ban it outright. If you find yourself in a situation where you're tempted to drop the spoilers or pop up the spoiler boards while you're at full flaps coming in, obviously you're too high, in which case just go ahead and pull them up and go around. Alright, so I'm coming in to land. What I always do, my technique to do first flaps, I idle the throttle, put my nose up a little bit, that bleeds off some speed. I'm well within the zone for the first notch of flaps. I'll go flaps 1, flaps 2, and each notch of flaps, it gives you that candy stripe warning. That's the maximum speed that you can fly at that particular flap setting. I'm in the zone. I can see the runway. I'm committed to land. Gear down. Some differential brakes. It won't go away. Alright, so I'm in the zone. Below 2,000 feet. Give it some gas. Remember, in proper aircraft, all you want to do is slow the plane down by slowly idling the engine, coming off the props, and bringing the nose back, or bringing the yoke back to pull up the nose. Make sure your airspeed is in the white arc, and then you can go ahead and give it the first notch, and then slowly put yourself in the landing profile. I'm a little bit crooked, so let me correct myself. Okay, here we go. I am at flaps 2. Come off the gas, bleed off some speed. So flaps 3, and as you can see, my speed limit has come down some more. At flaps 3, 1 notch to go. Flaps 4, full flaps. I'm in a jet aircraft, but I'll do my gumps anyway. I have gas on the carriage, gear is down, no mixture, no props. All I have is my throttle.
Glide slope, 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 glide slope.
I'm going to be doing another video on transitioning to jets. As you can see, I don't have to worry about mixture.
500.
I don't have to worry about props. I don't have to worry about engine management. I don't have to worry about manifold pressure. I don't have to worry about engine temperature issues. I don't have to worry about shock cooling. Don't have to worry about cowl flaps. There's a lot of crap I do not have to worry about when flying a damn it. Plane is going to taxi right in front of me. Actually, doing some quick math in my head here, I can land safely. He is taxiing off. Yeah, I can land. This is a go around situation, but and I'm coming in high, but this is a light jet, very light jet. I have to enter runway. Literally, and I'll just go
50,
slowly.
40.
There's another plane
40,
in front of me. I'm gonna stop.
20, 10.
Watch me stop before I hit that plane. Watch me stop. Watch me stop. Standing on the brakes, but and there it is. All right. If I tried that shit in the real world, I'd take away my license. Thank God simulator is just a game. I'm sure that's to piss somebody off. But anyway. And that's all I have to say about that. One more thing I forgot to say about flaps. Flaps up when taxiing. If you're taxiing in an aircraft, you want to raise the flaps the moment you set down. By the way, the speed brake issue, this plane doesn't have them evidently. Probably doesn't need them because it's so small. The reason why you want to raise your flaps when you're taxiing, if you're in a piston aircraft, a light piston aircraft, and it's a nice windy day, we have in Ohio all the time, and you're taxiing from the runway to the parking area, and your flaps are down, remember, flaps lowers your stall speed. What that means is, if you're taxiing around with your flaps down, it's just going to go ahead, blow you off the runway. Larger aircraft, heavier aircraft, such as, 747, 757, whatnot, those planes, they don't have to worry about that. They can just go ahead, take the flaps up at their discretion. But general rule is, the second you're down and you're leaving the runway, go ahead and raise your flaps. Small, I'll go ahead and park up by this very beautiful gate, courtesy of Rex. So we can do a decent park job here. And I'm on the inside, Drew. Let's see how fast, how close I can get it. The rule of taxiing on the line. How did I do? Yes! Right there. Okay. I'm in between. Good enough. The rule for taxiing, to making sure your plane, the nose gear is on the taxi line, is very simple. When you're taxiing, just make it so that the taxi line goes right through your right leg. Once the taxi line is lined up with your right leg, That means the nose gear, which right here is in the middle of the fuselage, is approximately, right by your right leg. Alright, that's enough of me. That's all I have today. Hopefully you found this episode on flaps interesting. Flightsimguy here. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.